Evan and I, we've been together 10 years total, almost 11. We actually have a funny story because we went to the same high school, but we didn't really hang out or know each other that well.
Never talked to each other, nothing. Just
never.
Passed
in the hall. That was it.
Yep.
But he actually grew up very closely with my brother, my oldest brother, which is kind of ironic. Yeah. So when I told my brother who I was dating, he was just like, "You're kidding." We got together. I came home from college, and we just it all happened. He was here farming, so he never went away. He was always home. That's when we kind of ran into each other in a different sense. Like 14 months later, we were engaged.
Yeah.
But we had talked about marriage. I don't know, it was like 6 months in. We were already talking about it. So I grew up in church, and he did too, but I grew up a little bit more in church regularly every Sunday. When we first started dating, I was like, "So you coming to church with me?" And he did, of course. And it's just, God's been a part of our lives ever since then. I feel like we've always had God at the center of our relationship from the start. We've always wanted to, be the best partners we could be.
We both had the same mentality about everything, and we never really had any troubles and no issues or anything, because God is something that we've always put first. And like she said, I went to church when I was younger, but I kind of fell off, faded away. And she stuck, went to church the whole time, and she got me kind of back into the church, and and I'm glad she did. Mm-hmm. God has blessed us in numerous ways.
When we first got married, we kind of had that attitude I feel like some young couples have, where it's like, it happens. It's just, that was the mentality, I guess. But about a couple years in, it wasn't happening, so it was kind of like, okay.
Everybody that we were close with, like friends-wise, were having kids. So we were just like, all right, what's going on here? Like, now we want to have a kid.
So we got to a point where it was like, okay, maybe we should be more intentional and not just have like a, if it happens kind of, perception. After about a couple of years of being more lax about it, we got more intentional, being purposeful for a couple of years, and then things still weren't happening. And then we started having these conversations, because I'm 2 years older than Evan. So we would have these conversations where we would say, all right, if we're not pregnant by the time I'm 30, then maybe we should go to the doctor or ask questions, because we did this a couple times where we would say like, okay, this is the cutoff. We would get to that point, and neither one of us felt like a urgency to do that. Even, I feel like a lot of women, as you get older, the urgency kind of gets more intense. Well, I turned 30, and neither one of us really felt led to do that. And I can't really explain why. It wasn't like we didn't feel like that wasn't a good option, or we shouldn't do this, or I don't know how to explain it. We weren't feeling like an urgency, like this is what we should do right now. As bad as we wanted to have a baby, we never got to that point where we were like, okay, let's get on the phone and make a phone call. Sure. It just didn't happen. And I remember the next deadline we set for ourselves was if we weren't pregnant by the time I was 32. Sure. And then I got to 32, and we still didn't have a baby, and we still weren't calling, we still weren't making appointments. And a year before she was born, both of us got to a point where we were having some really hard conversations about, this isn't happening, and it's really emotional, and it's really hard to think about, because at that point we were 6 years in. We were definitely at a point where we were really having to have the conversation of what does our life look like without children. And those were some hard conversations. It was conversations we really didn't want to have, so we would tiptoe around the conversation. But I just remember, in the spring of last year. Spring of last year. I'm new mom, tired. Last year, in the spring, we had a real heart about, we might not have kids, and how do we feel about that, and what does that mean, and
we talked about adopting kids several different times.
Lots of times, and we still didn't ever feel
and then we would talk several times about doing the treatments.
So the only thing we need to do really was to just talk about like life without children. And I can't speak for you, I can only speak for myself, but I feel like we're kind of at peace. Like, this might not happen, so what does our life look like? We have lots of nieces and nephews that we love, like, unconditionally. We love them so much, and we love traveling, we love doing things, so we were like, let's try to just see the bright side. Like, we can wake up whenever we want to, we can travel. I think we always just kind of knew that it would work out. Like a kind of faith where it's like, okay, if God is not giving us a child, then what is he protecting us from? Right. And that's where faith really has to like get real. Like, if we don't have a child, it's for a reason, and it's because God has a good plan for our life. It doesn't seem that good to us because that's not what we pictured, and that's not the thing that most married couples picture going through. But me personally, especially as a woman, and the person that was gonna have to carry the baby and all these things, I just remember lots of nights of telling God thank you. Even though we didn't have a baby, I would be really emotional, really upset, crying. I'm gonna cry now. But you just have like real conversations with God, and you say, thank you for whatever it is that you are protecting me from. Your plan is greater than mine. And because what I can picture with having a child is so beautiful, your plan is that much more beautiful, because I can't picture what you have for me. I can't picture what's coming. I can only picture what it's like to have a baby, and that seems beautiful, but your plan is better. So how beautiful is that, Awesome. So that was kind of my heart. As the woman, I didn't know if it was my fault that we weren't having a baby. Didn't know if it was his fault. That was another reason why, like, going through treatment, I didn't feel personally. I'm a very emotional person, so I just could only imagine, like, finding out those answers. What are those answers? Do we want those answers? And some people need those answers, and that's great, and that's their journey. Our journey was not that.
I've told her like several times, because I'm more of a laid back person. I've told her, like, when the time is right, it's gonna happen, and if it ain't supposed to happen, it's not gonna happen. I think one thing is, once we finally had that mentality of, if it happens, it happens, like, we completely quit stressing about everything, and I think that helped a lot. I think just the load coming off of us, like, if it's supposed to happen, God's gonna make it happen when our time is right.
And if he's not gonna make that happen, then he still has a good plan for us. So what is that plan? And I mean, it's encouraging when you see that other people are desperately wanting answers and desperately wanting a child. And God does give you the desires of your heart, and God will do those things. Obviously, if it's his plan. It gets discouraging after 6 years of trying to have a baby. And after 6 years of month after month after month after month of no, honestly, even to the point of getting pregnant, it was hard to accept that it was real. I'll never be able to put that in words.
Sure.
I didn't know what 2 pink lines looked like. So I literally was in shock. Pray for God's plan. That's a hard one because it requires a lot of faith. But I truly feel that's what gave me the most peace, was to pray for God's plan. I wanted to pray for a child. I wanted to pray, and you can, and you should, the things that your heart desires. But I just reached a point, again, as the woman that was going to be carrying the child, I didn't know what God was protecting me from. I know people that have experienced loss, experienced things that are extremely hard. I prayed for God's plan, and I would lay my head down at night and I would say, God, I want to pray for a baby, but I want to pray for your plan more. I know that's beautiful, and I want that. And why would I not want that? So praying for God's plan and having faith that God's plan is beautiful. But if you are struggling, it's okay to be upset. It's okay to be mad. It's okay to feel all the things. It's okay to tell God that you're mad. God is listening and wants us to talk to him and wants us to express our heart. And he knows your heart, but putting it in words is powerful. My advice, and to follow, your heart and the Holy Spirit and what you feel led. If you don't feel peace with appointments, if you don't feel peace with adoption, if you don't feel peace with any other options that are out there, that's for a reason, because God has something coming for you.